Hello, and thank you for joining IDEX Health and Science for our series on optimizing fluidics for IVD. Today's segment surveys pump technologies for IVD. Today, we have a number of product experts with us from IDEX, as well as a guest, a design engineer and system developer. And our format for this program will be a brief overview, an introduction of the participants, followed by a roundtable discussion. That will last approximately 20 minutes, after which we'll answer questions sent in from those of you listening on the phone, and you can begin keying your questions anytime into the box provided. If you're viewing this program as an on-demand webinar, you will hear the question from the original webcast, and later in the program, we'll give you an email address to send us any questions that you may still have. We'll ask 3 quick survey questions throughout the program, and we'd like to hear from you what you're looking for on the subjects of fluidic systems and fluidic optimization. I'll take a moment now to go around the room and introduce each participant in today's webinar. You'll also see on your screen some additional details about each person's fluidic experience and product specialties. Our guest today is John Minulo. John's a mechanical engineer and system developer for several instrument platforms with more than 25 years of experience. Currently, he's the principal consultant at Fluidics Design Incorporated. Brad Bessie is the VP of Business Development for IVD at IDEX. His background includes deep familiarity with Sapphire Engineering precision dispense pumps from IDEX. Darren Lewis is a scientist, and Darren manages research and technology development for IDEX Health and Science. Mechanical engineer Jeff Stokes has extensive experience designing fluid handling hardware from atmospheric liquid handling robots to UHPLC pumps and valves. Here at IDEX, Jeff leads our system integration projects. I'm Bob McCarthy, R&D Director at IDEX Health and Science. Throughout my career, I've worked in a range of instrumentation from cell culture systems to drug discovery systems in regulated environments. I'll be your moderator for all 5 segments of our series of webinars, Optimizing Fluidics for IVD. If you need to sign up for the remaining programs, one each month, visit webinar.idex-hs.com, or you can catch them for later playback, and I believe we'll have them available for download as podcasts as well. One quick note before we get started with our roundtable discussion. We want these discussions to be open and informative for the engineers who are our customers. But that said, because we deal with innovative, often patent-pending scientific technologies, we're bound by non-disclosure agreements. That means we won't be able to give you the exact name of recognizable partners or platforms. We'll just refer to them generically as a leading hematology manufacturer, for instance, or a life science assay instrument. The stories are real. The names have been changed to protect everyone. Pumps, the heart of the fluidic system. Now, why do we say that? The chemistries, the optics, the detection are all important, of course, but the pumps, the fluidics, bring together all the interactions within the system. So what are the key criteria for choosing pumps for IVD?
2 of the main criteria to look for is accuracy and precision. From those 2, it'll give you the direction to what type of pump you'll need, whether you need a high-precision piston dispense pump or something to move bulk fluids around like a rotary Vane pump or a gear pump. And then, of course, you come down to what type of fluid is being used, the viscosity, the temperature, cost, of course, the wetter materials for chemical compatibility, life cycle, overall life of the pump, seal material and seal life, type of seal that you may need, fittings and mounting, if you could mount it into a manifold or is it a discrete pump, pressure and back pressure requirements you need for the system, flow, of course, what type of flow you need, things like operating temperature, priming, self-priming is another one, overall footprint of what the size of the pump is going to be and how it fits into a system, and electrical requirements, and depending on if it's a precision dispense pump, you may have to worry about speed and increment stepping for dispensing accurate volumes. These design criteria are learned over a long time of experience working in the field. They're not book-taught. They come from direct experience of knowing what type of pumps, when they're needed, and the applications they need to be used for.
We usually talk about pumps from the characteristics of the set point that we put them at. However, almost always whenever you're doing a pumping application, you're going to want to start the pump and have fluid flow start when you want it to, stop the pump and have the fluid flow stop when you want it to, and you want to achieve a set point and maintain that set point accurately. So your choice in pumps is really going to be dictated by meeting those criteria for a given application. Some pumps do very, very well at maintaining an operational set point. Some actually do better at rise times and fall times of fluid flow. Some do really well when there are pressure changes, whereas some are very sensitive to pressure changes happening downstream. So there's a lot of choices you need to make, and you need to make concessions sometimes. The hope is that through those concessions, you choose the right set of parameters for your application. We have a wide variety of pumps that we employ in different applications, and a wide variety of mechanisms that we've employed, including flow feedback, pressure feedback, a variety of other timing considerations we've done. So we have a lot of experience in actually making these things work under real-world practical conditions. Some of that stuff, most of that stuff is probably not found in the textbook.
And a lot of that we do, I would say, in labs. We have, great R&D labs that we're able to bring all of our components together, but the pumps, especially in terms of the feedback control, are able to be tested, and we use them to basically validate a lot of the customer challenges that that are brought to us.
Absolutely, and I think I'd like to add, too, that when we do these designs, we actually thoroughly test them, work with them. We don't rely on the customer to do our testing for us. We usually work under their parameters, their constraints, and we try and come up with an optimized system before it actually falls in their hands most of the time.
Let's ask a survey question. How often do you perform scheduled maintenance on dispensing pumps?
We should have a brief discussion on the types of pumps that are available for engineers designing for an IVD system. For precision and precision dispense and aspiration, you have two main categories: syringe pumps and pistol displacement pumps. Those give the highest accuracy and the best repeatability. And then you have diaphragm solenoid operated pumps, which are electronically operated diaphragm that gives you a per shot volume. It is not a variable volume, it is a per shot volume. So if you have a set at 50 microliters, it'll give you a 50 microliter shot per cycle of the pump. And then as you move into where you want to move more bulk fluids around, you have what's called diaphragm, gear, and rotary vane motor operated pumps. These will give you bulk movement of liquids for wash systems, pressurizing wash systems, waste systems, and so forth, where you're moving a large amount of fluid to wash out a system. And then also you have peristaltic pumps, which also can be used in fairly accurate modes, depending on the type of tubing. But the tubing is there as an added cost and maintenance item, but the pump has its applications in the field. And last but not least is the rotary ceramic piston-style pump, which you also will get fairly accurate shots between each oscillation of the piston. They're long-life pistons, and they are fairly accurate shot to shot.
By fairly accurate, we probably mean a CV of 0.5% or so?
They're down there, yeah. They're below 1%, depending on whose manufacturer.
I think of the different types of pumps that we manufacture. If we kind of zero in on the dispensing pumps, which are used for traditionally syringe pumps, which are used for dispensing or pipetting, diluting applications. But when I think of customers who come to us over the years, they've had a problem, and the typical problem that we've seen is they're having seal failures with their existing technology, be it syringe or piston-based, and their dispense pumps. Seal failures either due to crystallization of media or just to poor design of the pump causing side loading on the seals, and we're really where we've been able to help them is utilizing some of our new technology with our piston dispense pumps primarily, which allow them to offer basically long life alternatives. We can use things like seal wash in our designs, which can help sweep away crystalline buildup that may occur in other competitors' products. There has kind of been this recurring theme that we've seen where seal failures really being the dominant pain that a lot of our customers have come to us with, that we've been able to help them significantly. And John, I know you've experienced that firsthand.
Yeah. Definitely seals. Seals are always the Achilles heels of a pump. There are times when you'll get good life cycle out of a pump until you put it in the application and see what happens. If a precipitate comes out, some salts come out, it acts as pretty much as a sandpaper and eventually breaks down the seal. And that's a major issue, and that's where sometimes you may need, as Brad said, a wash cycle through the pump to clean out the precipitates to give you that long life of the pump seal.
We did some work for a leading West Coast immunoassay instrument designer, and they were building their next generation platform using conventional syringe pumps with glass syringes with Teflon seals. And the heavy salt buffers were shredding the seals, and they were failing in a matter of days. And we were able to come in with our ceramic piston technology and ceramic valve technology on a plug-and-play syringe drive that basically allowed them to get the same functionality, plug and play in their instrument without any sort of reprogramming, but the life of the syringes went from days to years, literally over 3 years, just by using our seal wash technology and our piston and valve technology. And so that was a real win for the customer because the uptime was there, maintenance problems were solved, and cost was dramatically lowered.
So we also have some applications, Jeff, right, where we've tried to extend the pressure ranges of our pumps and work in sort of unconventional modes, right? You've been involved in some projects where we've changed sort of the operational modes of our pumps, right, to meet certain requirements?
Sure. We're not limited to what's typically off the shelf. We can size pistons, we can size the head, we can do custom heads, and we can actually customize the drive mechanics so that we can achieve the flow rate and the pressure that best fits the customer's application.
So if I didn't want a seal wash or I wanted 2 washes or something, you could actually probably put that in, right?
Sure. Wash is always an option. It's something we recommend if it's something that the host system can accommodate, but it's not necessary if there's not buffers involved. It does give added life, even in a pure aqueous situation, but it's always an option.
Survey question. For what application area are you developing systems? Is it point of care, maybe a large-scale system for central lab, or a small benchtop system?
Well, we just talked about precision dispensing here, but there are definitely applications where you need to move a fluid in the bulk amounts, say in a wash system or a waste system to move out the waste.
Well, we have customers that think they need to use piston pumps or syringe pumps for doing something as simple as a probe wash or a cuvette wash, but we have other solutions that we've come up with where we actually use a gear pump with pressure feedback and actually monitor solenoid valve activity so we can actually deliver higher flows, higher pressure, DI water solutions for feeding multiple probe washes or feeding cuvette washing stations. We've also developed on-demand supplies for the gear pump situation. We actually would monitor with some low-level controls. We can monitor solenoid valve activity on a system and actually supply and generate DI water at pressure on demand so that you don't have to have a constant pump running or a constant pressurized vessel.
That would really basically simplify a lot of the utilities on the instrument as well, right? You have fewer, major recirculating tanks and that sort of thing.
Right.
I imagine the life of the pump is probably extended tremendously just by it not having to run 24/7 with this type of configuration, correct?
That's correct. We actually have had customers that have replaced problem pumps because they did have to run 24/7 just in case there was a need for the DI water at pressure. This allows the pump to be off and monitoring solenoid valve activity so that within hundreds of milliseconds it's up to pressure delivering liquid, so the pump actually can live much, much longer.
I think the other point I'd like to make about this is that, and it may not be obvious, we're not just selling pumps or pumps and a pressure transducer, but actually the control with that as well. So we have firmware that can do this low-level code that, we can provide an easy software interface for customers to integrate that, sort of more plug-and-play than having to do their own integration.
We're dealing with customers globally. We've been able to use some of our technology to develop kind of next-generation dispense pump technology that will meet some of the sensitive price points of the emerging OEMs, but at the performance levels demanded by the West. One thing I'd like to mention about our dispense pump technology, and that's really one area that we've focused on the last 10 years, is that we are bringing, we believe, new technology to the market. These are not your father's syringe pump. Basically, understanding the needs of the global OEMs, we're seeing requirements from OEMs in China and India and the Western markets, including Japan, and we've come up with some pretty new innovative pump technology, which really allows us to offer the performance required by the Western OEMs, the Japanese OEMs, but at a price that's compelling, a total cost of ownership that's compelling even for OEMs within China and India.
What makes it different?
It's primarily the drive mechanism. I mean, the pistons are, for all intents and purposes, the same, and those are manufactured in-house. It's one of our core competencies. But really where we made great progress in the last 3 to 5 years is on a very inexpensive yet robust and precise drive mechanism utilizing stepper motor technology. That's where the bulk of the cost was in previous generation piston pumps and in current syringe pump technology. And we found, without giving away, some IP, we found some ways of basically driving out the cost of that drive mechanism while maintaining precision and accuracy and reliability.
Mm-hmm. Wow. At first you think, how can we talk for 20 minutes about pumps, but we've barely scratched the surface? For information on how IDEX Health and Science can optimize fluidics for your instrument, check out www.idex-hs.com. While you're there, you can request our new instrument design resource. It's free, and it was developed specifically for design engineers, truthfully. Survey question. What fluidic topic would you like to see next? Write in your suggestions. Maybe it's an area you're having a problem with in your applications, such as bubbles in your system, or maybe it's related to your next generation instrument. Where could good information help you? All right, so let's talk about the future of pumps in IVD systems. Where are we going? Where's the trends for innovation?
First of all, there's now a possibility for a merger of a pump and a manifold, right?
Right.
There's higher levels of integration that we haven't talked about here.
And we're doing
valve
that today.
pumps, manifolds, sensors. We can integrate things in pumps moving forward that we never used to be able to.
Smart pumps. I mean, the problem is how much you want to say, because we've talked about some things in our long-term strategic and innovation plans that you don't want to necessarily disclose to the world that you're working on it, right? So, but I mean, we've talked about using sensors to really transform pump technology.
Well, a couple of areas that we're working on right now. One of them is increased multiplexing of pumps, many more pumps being controlled from single I/O channels, things like that, being able to place them in manifolds, add other components to pumps in a seamless manner, like pressure transducers and flow sensors and things like that, and other IDEX Health and Science components, like valves. We're actually looking at ways of integrating all those together seamlessly. Another area that we've been working on, and one area of active research that we've got going on right now, is to take a conventional pump, like a peristaltic pump, and actually use flow or pressure feedback to control the output flow. So we get a dynamic clamp that locks the flow into a set point level that actually gives you levels of precision that you were never able to achieve before. So that might open up brand new markets and brand new applications for a pump that you might have previously written off as useful for only one other area. So we're constantly looking forward to trying to identify disruptive technologies like that to try and apply them to these new problems as they emerge.
Thanks, Darren. So it's time now for your questions, and thanks to those of you who have sent in your questions for our fluidic experts. A quick introduction here for another member of our team who's just been able to join us, Bruce Carboni. He's our product manager for our Sapphire brand precision dispense pumps. He has broad global experience in medical device and semiconductor industries. Welcome, Bruce.
Good afternoon, everyone, and good morning on the West Coast.
So here's the first question. If I haven't used your pump before, how do you support me on getting it running out of the box so I can work with it within a day, and I don't need to get my whole software group involved to run it? Sounds a good one to start. Darren, do you want to field that question to start off with?
Sure. We've provided solutions for people by working with their team. We develop firmware on site, and we've also even developed software to actually run the system. We integrate together. We typically do a whole lot of testing here based on the customer specifications, and we work with them pretty closely on the development. And what we've done is actually done all the connections and wiring and firmware and drivers and all those kinds of things. And the idea is to right out of the box, give them something that they can unpack and start running right away. We've had quite a bit of success with it. Some customers do prefer just to have the pump themselves and hook up their own drivers and do their own development. But what we found that the most successful path we found with many customers is to actually provide that upfront service, because that gets them running without pulling in all the resources at their own company.
Excellent. Anything to add, anybody else on the team here? All right. So the next one then, how about this one? If I want to eliminate preventive maintenance, what do I look for when I'm speccing or specifying a pump? Bruce, would you like to field this one?
Sure. I guess from my experience in working with customers looking for extended life, generally they scope what is the expected life of the instrument, and they work backwards from there to spec in the expected life of the pump. With that said, traditional technologies has shown the weakness in the pump is in the seal, and that's really the primary source of preventative maintenance and recurring maintenance. So I would suggest that you really look at demonstrated seal life technology.
Excellent. Here's another from the audience. You mentioned seal wash. How does it work, and how does it extend the life of the seal? I'm going to turn this one over to you, Jeff. Would you go for this one?
Sure. Seal wash, like we've talked about in previous conversations, it's particularly helpful if you're running buffer solutions where you might have something that's going to come out of solution and form crystals. When you're talking about a dynamic system like a reciprocating pump where we have ultra-hard plungers made out of either sapphire or ceramic or even sometimes ruby, these are reciprocating through usually polyethylene seals, so over thousands of strokes, you might have a small film of fluid that works its way through the seal, and if it's just air on the backside of the seal, it's going to actually dry out and allow those crystals to form, or in an ideal case, if nothing came through, you'd have a dry plunger on the backside. So the basics of seal wash is to keep the backside of that seal wet with preferably water or something inert to the system, and either constantly or daily or even weekly, depending on what you're pumping, how many cycles you're accumulating, you basically just flush some water through the backside of the high pressure seal that's doing the work. So there's a little chamber that's in the back that keeps the plunger lubricated and keeps it wet and keeps anything from coming out of solution and forming crystals and attaching to the plunger, so that when it travels back in through that seal, it doesn't damage the seal. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, sounds good. Anything to add for anybody else that's been worth it? Brad, you got any other comments on that one?
I mean, I think the only thing I'd mention on seal wash is it is a new concept that we've brought to IVD. It is something that has been in existence in the HPLC, analytical chemistry, chromatography instrument market for, what, Jeff, 20 or 30 years?
Decades, easily.
Decades. And so there is some, people question it. They're saying, well, how do I know this is going to work? And how can I ensure that the wash water won't get into my system fluids, and we've done a lot of educating, and clearly we have to do more. But that is an area where it is not something that's kind of brand new developed. It's been around used in life science for decades. We've just kind of brought it over to the diagnostic world.
And I think the payback's huge too. When we hear some customers on some IVD platforms having to change seals or syringes every 3 to 6 months, where we typically try to design our pumps to last usually years, if not the life of the instrument. So the payback is not having downtime, not having a lost sample, not having service calls. It's a pretty inexpensive solution to give you lifetime and decreased PMs.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. All right, let's switch to another one. Here's a great one, I think. What methods do you use to compensate for backlash in the drive system? Brad, you want to start off with that one? I'm sure a couple people want to comment on this one.
Sure. I mean, we've seen a variety of approaches over the years. We've seen available kind of mechanical versions and things. Typically, the vast majority of our customers today are using software. It's done in electronics, and the philosophy being, why pay for it? Why add cost to the pump to mechanically add it in there? if you get it for quote-unquote free in programming. That being said, we have had requests, here and there for, reduced or zero backlash pumps, but the vast majority are using electronics.
Mm-hmm. Any other comments on backlash for this group?
We've also done some applications with flow sensors. So basically by monitoring the output flow, you can compensate the pump even in the presence of backlash. You can actually guarantee an output flow rate regardless of small amounts of backlash. If you're in a dispensing regime rather than constant flow rate, what we've done are algorithms where we've actually reset the drivetrain moving backward and then stepping forward to a certain position before attempting a dispense. So we've done a lot of tricks like that as well.
Right, and to add to that, Darren, I've seen some customers use the home sensors. Most of our dispense pumps have a home sensor where you establish an origin before you start your aspiration or dispensing, and they would actually monitor that home sensor where they would, home, reverse, and count the number of steps until home cleared, and that would be their backlash, right? And then they would actually monitor that over the life of the pump and actually compensate for that as the pump ages. Some people have done that, for example.
Yeah, and that can be used as a service diagnostic as well. It can tell you if there's something starting to go bad with a certain pump, so you don't have to wait until the pump fails or you start having bad results from your assays. You can actually monitor that on an ongoing basis.
Now, with that said, for many applications, we don't really see an appreciable amount of change in backlash over the life of the pump, right? That's a pretty demanding application with millions and millions of strokes, right? For the most part?
Typically,
right. Yes. Yep.
All right, switching gears just a little bit. Darren, I think I'm going to give you the thought process to tee this one up too. What pump would you suggest for a 1 microliter per minute channel with a precision of less than 0.5% CV and minimal ripple?
Okay, that's an interesting question. Off the top of my head, I'd throw out a pump like a 250 microliter positive displacement pump. But what we need to know, there's a couple things we need to know, is the CV actually on flow rate or on amount dispensed, and into what pressure is it actually doing the dispense? Because that will dictate how we do the pump seal. That'll also dictate likely the pitch of the screw that we're going to want to use in it. If it's a very low pressure application, I would recommend one of our 250 microliter VFP pumps. If the pressure is a little bit higher, I try an F17. I would definitely recommend a 40 pitch screw. That gives you the most precision. But the other thing we'd like to know is what the maximum fill and dispense rates will be for that pump, and how it's going to be operated, whether you need to run continuously for hours on end, or whether you intend on continuously refilling and dispensing. So off the top of my head, I would say a dead ringer for that might actually be one of our 250 microliter more or less standard versions. But without any, we would actually want to find out a few more details about the application before we go too far down that road. We do have some other options as well.
Excellent. I guess I would like to just ask for John, who's our guest design engineer from outside IDEX, any other comments on support that you think is critical for these types of questions and application questions related to specifying a pump?
Well, as we spoke earlier in the presentation, there's all the design criteria that go into a pump, but it's also experience to know some of the different types of pump technologies that can be used for the different applications. And with the broad knowledge that IDEX brings to it, it definitely helps out the design engineers out in the field, that they can cover quite a few different aspects of pump technology.
So while you get the mic, how about this next question that came in from actually the same person? How can you improve or prevent contamination of the pump or manifold? Since we are going to be talking about that, I'll put a pitch in here for our next one on connective tubing. We'll talk about that later. But pumps, manifolds, the whole gamut of the fluidic circuit. How can we prevent bacteria or debris from contaminating it? You want to try that to start with, John?
Sure. Always, the main thing is knowing your design and your fluid passageways. Is there any spots in your design of the manifold specifically where debris could get caught up clogs could have formed. I mean, some of the, I'm not going to, bad word for it is brute force, but you can use a washout system to wash out the passageways. And also, depending on the design of the manifold itself, you may be able to put in washout ports where that could be part of a maintenance cycle where someone can manually wash out the manifold passageways. But it's always something good to think right from the beginning of the design is what fluids are you flowing through there, what type of debris or bacteria or precipitates can come out if it's in the process of running the system.
Okay, we're running short on time. Brad, you want to have the last word on contamination? Any other thoughts there? Wrap it up.
I think contamination, I mean, it's all about system architecture. It's about, what's upstream, downstream. Are you having filters? What's actually type of media you're running? Is it DI water? Does it have any sort of, chemistry in it to prevent bugs from growing? What we typically try to do is understand the application, particularly if it's a pump integrated into a manifold, and understand, okay, what's the fluid circuit, what type of fluid's going through where, and actually ensure that we're designing, whether it be the pump or the manifold or the entire circuit, to minimize the chances of clogs or areas where debris could get, stuck.
Okay.
It's not so much take this product off the shelf. This is more of a consultative, what are you doing, here's the solution.
Yeah. All right. I think I'm going to have to cut it short, although this has been a great conversation. I want to thank all of you who have sent in questions, and thank you also to our panel of experts. And to all of you listening in on this webinar, thanks for joining us. Next month, as we were just discussing here, our Fluidic webinar surveys connection options for IVD, and there's some very interesting information in that segment on how to determine the most effective combination of manifolds, tubing, and fittings to optimize the flow path in your specific system. Once again, on your screen, for additional questions, you can contact John Mignolo at john@fluidicsdesign.com or call him at 914-241-2048. To reach one of the participants from IDEX Health and Science, call 866-339-4653 or email customerservice.hs@idexcorp.com. For other segments in this webinar series, please visit webinar.idex-hs.com. For IDEX Health and Science, I'm Bob McCarthy. Thank you for joining us today.